All right, guys, it's going to be the first third themes video. This is just something that I wanted to do for fun. I thought it would be interesting to take a look at a couple of different themed lineups as well as some trends that I've seen in fantasy so far. We're a little over a third of the way through the season, so we got a good feel for where players are at. So heading into the first lineup here, we have the All-Pro team. And as I go through these lineups, I'm going to focus a little bit less on breaking down projections for players and more focus on the four columns on the right there. So looking at the All-Pro team here, we have just a bunch of players that were expected to be dominant and have been dominant. Cal with 2 players on this team, and also Alex with 2 players on this team. So if you have a player on this team, you feel like you have a really good chance to win a championship with a high ceiling player. Looking at the draft, nothing really surprising there. A lot of early round picks. The one kind of breakout here at the bottom was Jake Ferguson. Jake Ferguson's definitely taken advantage of CeeDee Lamb being out, but a great piece for Sam there. And then the only other thing I want to talk about here is Puka Nacua is averaging 4.5 more points than even the wide receiver too. So that's just an incredible advantage for Alex's team, and honestly just in a very, very impressive season that we are seeing out of Puka Nacua so far. Moving on to the all-injured team. This team is filled with a bunch of pieces that managers were also expecting to be pretty solid pieces for their team, but are either hurt for a substantial period of time or are done for the season. So Joe Burrow wasn't putting up great numbers, but he had to face the Browns in week 1 and didn't get to finish that second game. So if Joe Burrow is healthy, I think we would be seeing a great season out of Joe Burrow, and that was a big loss for Grayson's team. You can also see Tim here with 2 players on this list, his 2nd round pick and his 4th round pick. And then I also have 2 players on this list, back-to-back rounds in the 4th and the 5th round for me. And then Kerr also has 2 players on this list, his 1st round pick and his 4th round picks. The 3 of us have had to deal with a decent amount of injuries so far, but also just in general, that 4th round there, not great in the injury department. All right, so the third theme team we're going to look at here is the all disappointment team. This team is made up of a bunch of high-profile players that just really haven't lived up to their draft position so far. So that first player is quarterback Kyler Murray. I didn't really think many quarterbacks whiffed, honestly, and this isn't even that big of a hit for Sam because he drafted, I believe, 3 quarterbacks. So quarterback, there really wasn't a strong miss this year. But as you go down this list, Kless has 2 players on this list, and Sam has 2 players on this list. So that could be a bit of a reason why they are struggling so far. And if you look in the draft there, five of these players were picked in the 2nd round, and that 7th pick in the 2nd round through the end of the 2nd round was just 4 straight misses. So just an interesting thing to look at there. And honestly, I don't know at this point that I would expect many of these players to bounce back super heavily, but I guess you could also maybe treat this lineup as a buy low list. But there's been a lot to be desired from a lot of these players. So like I said, just an interesting thing to look at. The last lineup we're going to look at here is the all-value team. Looking at this lineup, I would say you would feel a lot better about every single player on this list than you did coming into the season. Not that these players were bad, but just these guys have really established themselves as solid fantasy players this year. Dak Prescott has looked, honestly, the best that he has looked in a very long time and is putting up great numbers. Javonte Williams has been great for Tim. Travis Etienne has been solid. He had his first bad week this week, but solid value there down in the 11th round. Then looking at those receivers there, they went in the similar range, but both just having phenomenal seasons. And then we already kind of touched on Jake Ferguson and then Quinshon Judkins as well. He looks really, really good. Even in a bad Browns offense, he's looked tough. So if you take a look there in the draft column, none of these guys were early round picks. I mean, 7th round is the earliest pick here, but if your lineup looked like this, you'd be feeling really good about your team. So it's just like a interesting insight that there is value in late round picks. To wrap things up here, I'm going to take a look at some player trends that I've noticed so far. So there have been 4 breakout receivers that have just been true difference makers at the wide receiver position. Ibuka, JSN, Odunze, and Johnston, really in their first year of dominant performance, but really solid pieces for their managers so far. This group right here I see as being the next primed era of running backs. These guys will probably be top 2 round fantasy picks for the next 3 or 4 years, and all in really good situations and just really great running backs. So just an interesting group there as the NFL kind of turns over to a new era of players. And with that same concept down here at the bottom, these are just some guys that for the last 3 or 4 years we've seen primed, and up to this point in the season have kind of fallen off. A lot of these guys were pretty much picked rounds 1 through 3 for the last couple of seasons. So those were just some things that I thought were interesting to take a look at through the first third of the regular season here in fantasy football. But that's all I have. So the recap video will be out tomorrow night, and that's all I got. So thank you guys.